Welcome to another Wolverine Chronicle exclusive segment, Behind Enemy Lines. We are looking at Week 5. Michigan is traveling to Lincoln, Nebraska for the first true road game of the season. I've got Jeff Williams with me of Huskers Gameday Twitter. Jeff, what's up, man? How you feeling?
I'm feeling. Personally, I'm doing good. This game, I guess the buzz in Nebraska circles is the lack of buzz. But when they kick it off, I think that all kind of goes away.
Well, you guys definitely have the most loyal fan base in all of sports. I'm going to give you that before we even get going today because, Nebraska Cornhuskers travel well, even in the midst of consecutive, really tough seasons. You guys are classy individuals. You always treat people right and you support your team. So props to you and all of, Huskers Nation for doing that.
Well, on behalf of Husker Nation, which is a dangerous thing for me to do, I accept. And I would say if you're thinking about going to Lincoln, definitely do it. It's a bucket list if you love college football. And yeah, you will be treated right for sure. And it's a great time. And there's a lot of history. They're celebrating the 100th anniversary this year of Memorial Stadium. So anytime is a good time, and I know that there's renovations going on in the next couple of years, but make it out. Make it out.
Well, it's definitely a bucket list stadium for me. I've never been there. Maybe I'll get around the next time Michigan travels to Nebraska. But speaking of Michigan traveling to Nebraska, we've got a game coming up in just a couple of days. And for me, even though Nebraska is, let's just call it what it is. They're down right now, right? First year head coach in the midst of yet another rebuild. But it's Nebraska. It's a blue blood. It's Michigan versus Nebraska. And so, I'm here to get some intel from you. So let me just ask and kick things off by asking, what position group do you expect to be the strength of this team this season or in this game in particular?
I'm going to cop out and say, the rush defense, not necessarily like defensive line, but the rush defense has been really good. I think that there's still a little skepticism. How good is it? How good is this defense? I think they held Minnesota 55 yards rushing. Minnesota is a running team. Other teams like Northwestern were getting I don't have the exact numbers. I posted them on Twitter, but I think there's just like, how good is this rush defense? And it's going to be tested against Michigan. So if there's one thing Nebraska can hang their hat on, they got depending on what metric you look at, like the number 1 or number 2 rushing defense. So, but then again, you're playing Minnesota, Colorado, and we all know Colorado is a passing team, and then Northern Illinois and La Tech. So there's definitely not on the scale of Michigan, but we'll find out this Saturday how good they are. But that's the one thing I think Nebraska, Tony White's 3-3-5 defense, you can hang your hat on.
That's kind of what I expected you to say. When you're ranked number 1 in a statistical category, that's got to be the strength of the team. And, people can say what they want about Colorado and some of the competition. If you're ranked number 1, you're ranked number 1. So it means you're doing something good. Speaking of a 3-3-5 defense, that's what Michigan struggled with when they played TCU in the playoffs. And so, I don't anticipate it being a similar story, but, if Nebraska fans want to get excited about something, that's definitely an area to look at. Let's switch the question around. So what do you expect to be maybe the weakest position group for this team?
I hate to say it, but probably, the offense, I hate to say the offense, but if you're getting specific on the offense, there's a lack of explosive plays, a lack of speed at the wide receiver. Even the running back is not a burner. And then you go and you look at their offensive line. I hate to say everything, but like their offensive line, left tackle is a little leaky, to say the least. And quarterback is new. So, and quarterback, we can get into that. It's a tale of two seasons already, but it's a lack of, I think where a lot of Nebraska fans where like the lack of buzz comes in for this game is like, how are you going to score 21 points? And you probably would need some type of special teams or defensive touchdown or some stroke of luck. So I think it's just, I hate to, this is a little bit of a cop out, but just lack of explosive plays, like a playmaker. Like they had Trey Palmer last year. He could turn, they won some games just on his, like it was just the YOLO offense, just, throwing it over the defense. So I think the lack of explosive plays, and then the offensive line really, the left tackle is I don't mean to pick on anyone, but it's a little, they get scholarships. It's a little weak. The offensive line overall is not great. So I think it's just heavily balanced. Your hopes are in the defense and the offense. It's just, you hope they can make it through.
Well, you mentioned playmakers there, so let's go ahead and have that conversation. Let's look at the offensive side of the ball first. If there's a playmaker on this Nebraska team that Michigan has to keep an eye on the offensive side of the ball, who is it?
Oh, man. Maybe Thomas Fidone, the tight end. He was a former 5-star. He was higher than the guy from Georgia. It's Brock Bowers. He was right up there. He's had 2 knee injuries. It's like kind of like a Nebraska curse thing, but like ACL. So it's first year he's fully healthy. He's getting better. He's had, I believe, 3 straight games with touchdowns. First time a Nebraska tight end's done that in a while. The offensive coordinator seems to be a little bit better than previous offensive coordinators in getting the tight end involved in the red zone. I would hang my hat on him. I don't know if that's enough to hang your hat on, but I would go with him, and then I'll give you a wild card. And I know Jeff Sims had he had that meltdown against Colorado, which 8 million people saw. He hasn't played the last 2 games. But he does have he is sort of a playmaker, but he's a turnover machine. But if he's not going to, I don't think he's going to play. But if they have a package of plays of like a dozen plays for him and some design quarterback draws, and hope to God that he doesn't turn it over on those plays, he's someone that Michigan would have to account for. I believe. I know a lot of Husker fans just want to move on from him.
Have they mixed in Sims at all with Heinrich starting or not? I haven't really watched all the games all the way through.
So it was first 2 games were Sims, and then the last 2 games are Harburg. Sims has been hurt, not 100%. I believe he's getting better. I don't think he's at 100%, but they haven't mixed him in yet. So they've done the last 2 games with Harburg, and if I'm Matt Rule, I don't know what his thought process is. But you're probably going to need both quarterback. I hate the 2 quarterback system because if you have 2, you have none. But really, with the lack of, like, they've lost 2 of their running backs for the year, you're going to need Sims, even if he's the backup, to come in and do some design draws, and maybe even I was thinking even like a decoy at like wide receiver, because he's like 6'4", pretty big, and just show them something they haven't seen. Or you save that for Illinois, because I feel like they're not going to. I know it sounds weird. I don't know if Nebraska's going to put their best effort forward in this, or their best game plan, in the sense that I think they just want to survive and advance, and really focus on Illinois and Northwestern and Purdue and the more manageable games.
Well, I do have to say, Heinrich Harburg, I mean, that's a name for the ages right there. I don't know where you found this guy, but that's a strong, like, German name you got there. And it seems like they're running a little bit with him. I checked the box score of the last game. It looked like he was running all over the place.
Benovic, he's from Nebraska. He was an afterthought under Frost. I mean, I thought he was like 3rd on the depth chart coming in. And what he's done is not turn the ball. I know it's against Northern Illinois and it's against La Tech, but I think in the Frost era, they would have lost one of those games just by shooting themselves in the foot. Harburg he's not a great passer. I have a hard time coming up with a comp. I've heard Colin Klein from like Kansas State on my followers, but like he's got some running ability as well. He's not fast. He doesn't have that like a quick. But he has had some long runs against those teams, but like it seems like he is sort of a dual threat. I think Sims obviously has a little bit more get up and like a little more explosive, but he's been, I guess the best word is functional. And the best thing is Nebraska hasn't beaten themselves, and they haven't with like Adrian Martinez and Jeff Sims. And it's just been turnover. It's like they've led the country in turnovers or bad plays or bad snaps. So Harburg has just settled the waters, even when they have like a bad series, or I believe they had a turnover against like Northern Illinois. They just came out and like were just businessmen like. And the other thing that's encouraging is the second half has been much better than the first half. Although, I just don't know if that's wearing down a G5 opponent. But yeah, Harburg, the fans love them, and they're kind of, some of them are done with Sims, but he will. I believe he will start. But you got to keep your eye out for Sims. But yeah, it'll be interesting if he comes out.
Well, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. I'm assuming you're going to stick with the front seven, but I don't know. Maybe there's somebody in that secondary that's sneaking around. Who do you think is the impact player on defense?
Number 0 on the defensive line, Nat Hushmaker, I believe is his name. And the pronunciation sometimes gets a little, the Nebraska pronunciations. He's from like South Dakota. I think he's like 330 pounds. He's a sophomore, but really he's like a junior or senior. Number 0, they call him the polar bear. He's the defensive tackle. I mean, I think he's a really good, he's a very solid player. Another player who was injured, who is a linebacker, Luke Reimer, and I believe he will be playing this Saturday. So I think he's possibly going to be Nebraska's all-time tackler as long as he stays healthy. And that is, that to me is those are 2 guys to keep your eye out for. And what's interesting is coming into this year, I thought the secondary was like the strength of the team, but really that Nash, and there's also a couple young guys. Cam Leinhart and I might be forgetting one, but have really stepped up. So, and then you got to give the credit to the rush defense as well.
So the Big Ten West is pretty wide open if you're looking at this thing. I guess Wisconsin has got to be considered the best team at this point with the kind of embarrassment that Iowa put up against Penn State. Where do you anticipate Nebraska finishing in the Big Ten West?
I mean, I still give Wisconsin and Iowa, as much as people want to put down Iowa, you still got to respect the coach. You still got to respect the team. I think that they're 1-2. And then after that, Nebraska lost to Minnesota, but I just feel like from Minnesota to like Nebraska and Purdue and even Northwestern, it's just like a crapshoot. So yeah. I would hope that they could, on paper, I think they should beat Northwestern. I think they can beat Purdue, and I think that they could finish 3rd, most likely 4th in the division. You have Illinois as well, so it's a little, maybe that's a little too optimistic, but maybe like middle. I would say somewhere in the middle of the Big Ten West.
So finish this sentence for me, and this is very lofty expectations, hopeful expectations on your end. Nebraska wins on Saturday if.
I got my list. All right. So you want to hear the game plan?
Let's go.
Okay. You win the toss, you take the ball, and then you have a long drive and you eat up a lot of clock, or you pin Michigan down in like inside the 10. And then for the second half, you come out and you do I know Nebraska fans don't want to hear it. You do the onside kick and you recover the onside kick. So you take a possession away, win the time of possession. And that kind of goes back to my strategy. And listen, Nebraska fans are scarred by the Scott Frost Northwestern kick. They could have won that game straight up. Okay. This game, you can't win. You can't win straight up. I'm just being honest. Win the time of possession, no turnovers on offense. Minus, I would say you need, and the problem with the defense is, again, like they've have a lot of sacks, but they don't have a lot of turnovers. But you have to be like -2, like a JJ McCarthy like red zone interception that would happen. Bend but don't break, like long Michigan drives. You need 2 missed field goals from Michigan. So like long, like eight play drives, 11 play drives, and then like, Harbaugh's doing one of these, and then a dozen plays for Sims as a decoy. The heat, it's going to be 90 in the 90s, and the wind's going to be swirling. It's a very peculiar weather. So that would have to affect Michigan more than Nebraska. Michigan would obviously come in a little sleepwalking, maybe not taking this game as seriously as they should. And then I think you need an unsung hero like Malachi Coleman, who's like a wide receiver, like a 4-star wide receiver, who's a freshman, is probably not ready to play, but you need some like type of unsung hero that I can't see. And Teddy Prohaska would have to, have some play. He's a left tackle. And then Anthony Grant, 25 carries. And then you make all your field goals, even though they have a freshman field goal kicker and he missed a couple. So, and then you have to pray. So that is my, Michigan sleepwalking. And then very aggressive game plan. You just let it all hang out. What do you got to lose? And then trust your defense and hope you can kind of catch Michigan in a couple of mistakes that they make.
I absolutely love your answer, man. And any game plan that ends with "and then you got to pray," that's a long shot of a game plan.
You need the football, like pray means like a personal foul, first down on a Nebraska 3rd and long. Praying means like, a Michigan, just like a fumbled snap out of field goal territory or something like that. Like something where it's just like, it's not their day. Like stuff like that.
All right. Well, let me flip it to the other side here. Finish this sentence. Michigan wins if
they come in focused, hungry. They remember the 2021 game was a battle. They don't take Nebraska for granted, and it's a business trip. And they are patient, even if they're not playing their best game. They don't try to force anything. So I mean, this game straight up, Michigan wins. 98 times. I think it's like 97%, 98% of the time. But as long as Michigan comes in and it's a business trip, and they're focused and they don't get rattled early, they punt if they have to punt. They let Nebraska play that, bank on, hey, Nebraska's going to make a mistake. Trust their defense. Don't do anything stupid. Don't try to go for a 4th and 6 at mid. Just like pin Nebraska's offense down. Trust your defense. As long as they kind of play their game. And play it mistake free, I think Michigan wins. I mean, and that's kind of like the low case. What concerns me is like the high case where everything's clicking on all cylinders, and at that point,
Well, so you've got these two polar opposite scenarios that you've presented. So let me go ahead and ask you: do you have a score prediction for Saturday's game?
31, 34, 13. 34-13. Let's call it.
That seems realistic. I mean, Michigan hasn't given up double-digit points yet, and so I think if Nebraska does get into the double-digit range, that's a small win for Nebraska. I don't want to be so overconfident on the Michigan side to just say that we're definitely going to blow Nebraska out here. I'm always very cautious about saying things like that, but I think that that's realistically going to be what we're seeing here is Michigan in the mid-30s and Nebraska with a score or two on the board. So I think that's a good prediction there. I got a couple bonus questions for you. These are some fun ones, man. First, we got a guy by the name of Ernest Hausman, who will be coming back to Lincoln. And my first introduction to Ernest Hausman was a freakishly good game for a freshman linebacker playing for Nebraska. He had 10 tackles, including one spectacular tackle for loss against J.J. McCarthy last year. And then he made headlines as one of the highest profile transfers out of Lincoln to Michigan this season. And so do you think that Ernest Hausman plays with a chip on his shoulder this game a little bit and really wants to show out in front of Nebraska. Not to say that Nebraska did anything wrong to Hausman. He has nothing to be upset about. But do you think he maybe plays a little bit harder in this game than he would otherwise?
I mean, he's from Nebraska, I believe. So he's got friends of family in the stands. That can be a double-edged sword, but it's also, you're talking about like if you're a quarterback, but you're talking about a linebacker. I mean, so sometimes you can use the aggressiveness against the opponent, but I think he's pretty mature and he's going to play his game, and maybe he's got something to prove, maybe not. It's kind of interesting. He had his like best game against Michigan, and then Harbaugh was probably like, okay, do we have any back channel to get that guy? But yeah, I kind of forgot about him because like it's not. I want to say that it's not like they don't miss him. They certainly do. They certainly could use him, but like the defense really hasn't been the problem.
Right.
So yeah, does he play with the chip? Probably. Yeah.
And then the most important question of this entire interview: 97 Nebraska Cornhuskers, 97 Michigan Wolverines, split national championship. There should have been a championship game. So I think I know what your answer is going to be here, but I got to ask the question: who wins versus the 97 Wolverines versus the 97 Huskers? Who wins that game?
I mean, the Huskers, the Huskers. I mean, number one, your best player, Charles Woodson, is like not even relevant because like the Huskers are just like a bad. Okay, listen. All due respect to he is like the GOAT. Like all due respect, but like
okay,
yeah, Scott Frost passing. Okay, Nebraska is a running, is a ground and pound team, so he's kind of neutralized. In terms of defense, I mean, they handled Peyton Manning pretty well in the Orange Bowl. I know Michigan fans love to bring up Missouri, which Nebraska did win. But they handled if they could handle Peyton Manning in the Orange Bowl, I think they could have handled. Is it Greasy that they had? Brian Greasy was the quarterback. Brian Greasy. I mean, they had Tom Brady on the bench, and so insane. So my argument would be like Charles Woodson. With all due respect, he's not. He will get like 2 passes to him. He'd be sitting on a corner, probably make a couple tackles, maybe stop the ground and pound. But Nebraska was just, I think by the third or fourth quarter, I know you're probably like seething. I think that they really like break the game open. And the defense handled Peyton Manning okay, so I think they could handle Brian Greasy.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and withhold from getting too far into this conversation. I will, for the sake of my followers, I will say Michigan hands down would win that game, and there's a lot more to that 97 defense than Charles Woodson. Even if Charles Woodson isn't a factor in that game, there's no way the Huskers are moving the ball on that team. But we'll just, agree to disagree there. I feel like that's a wormhole we don't want to get sucked into right now. But I'm going to give you a theory of mine before we get off. So I think you guys need to root for Michigan to win the national championship this year. And here's why. I think the Nebraska curse is rooted in the 97 season. And I know you'll have a different perspective on this, but I feel like Tom Osborne, Scott Frost, I know you guys can't claim Philip Fulmer of Tennessee, but there was a lot of just weird energy at the end of the year that got Nebraska to split that championship with Michigan. From a Michigan guy's perspective, I feel like there's residual energy that is cursing you guys. And if Michigan wins it all this year, it'll be a release of the curse, and you guys will be free to be a blue blood once again. So there's my theory.
Yeah, it's really a shame. Like even like the '94 Penn State team, and Nebraska got both national titles that year, and probably because some people thought it was because it was Tom's first and all of that. But man, that Penn State team. I grew up in Central Pennsylvania, and I watched a lot of their games, and they were just like unbelievable. And that would have been such. We got robbed at both years of really, I think, a phenomenal game and a clash of styles and a clash of cultures and all of that. So I hear you on that. I mean, Michigan, all respect to them. I mean, I've been able to learn a lot about the program since Nebraska. I mean, I knew about them growing up, but I read the one book about like Rich Rodriguez. I think it's like 3 and Out, and it was like how Rich Rodriguez was just like the culture of Michigan. Like, there's a Michigan way of doing things that you can't just go and get. It's same with similar to Nebraska, like where there's just like peculiar things that people from the outside, they either get it or they don't. And I think that's one thing Nebraska and Michigan have in common. But yeah, I certainly would have loved to see that game. I know there's more. I know that I look at the records every now and then. I look at the like the schedules, and yeah, I mean, Michigan was phenomenal. Yeah, there probably was a little bit of whatever, but it's not really brought up in Nebraska circles. I think it's just like they got one for Tom. Tom left, and they got one on the way out. And there's definitely that ESPN article about like Charles Woodson and Peyton Manning and Phil Fulmer, and someone put Michigan third or something. So I think we can both agree the best way to settle it, or if we could go back in time, is on the field.
Well, and thank God that my kids will never know what it was like to just not have a championship game. Thank God we've evolved. And actually, and we don't need to get too deep into 12-team playoff and all that, but it's an exciting time for college football. Things are changing, whether you like it or not. Conferences are realigning. And so we've come a long way from, just 25 years ago when this split national championship happened. And but before we wrap up today, let me, I've been asking you a lot of questions, and is there anything on your mind about Michigan? Anything that you might want to ask a Michigan guy about this game or this team?
Yeah, I mean, expectations is national title, right? I mean, who do you, I mean, listen, I know that there's the Ohio State rivalry, and that's like on a separate level, and, can't really understand how big that is unless you're in it. But really, between Penn State and Ohio State, which one's, team-wise, which one scares you the most?
Yeah, Penn State on the road. Penn State on the road is the game that none of us really want to look at right now. That's, going to Happy Valley, playing a team like Penn State that actually looks like they might have their shit together this year, right? Like they look pretty good. So Ohio State will always be the big one. There's a different energy about the Michigan-Ohio State game, but something about that being at home, Penn State being on the road, it just feels like that Penn State game is going to be a major swing game in the Big Ten East. And so I would circle that game as the one that is probably the most concerning as far as the national championship goes. But there is a world that exists where Michigan plays well in that game and comes up short, but then beats Ohio State and still gets into the playoff. And so, hopefully we don't have to start playing with scenarios like that, but that, one of those 3 teams is definitely getting in to the playoff.
Well, yeah, it's Ohio State definitely feels like they're still elite, but they're not that super elite that they were just like 4 years ago. And it's just like going from Urban Meyer to Ryan Day, and once the Urban Meyer culture kind of, and people can say what they want about, but it's I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the passing offense. So Penn State scares you more than Ohio State, but yeah. So who do you think makes from the Big Ten? Who makes the college football playoff?
Well, I'm going to say Michigan 10 times out of 10. You're always going to get that answer from me. And that opinion is rooted in, I do believe that, so I'm a big believer, like you can't count Georgia out. You can't rank Georgia number 2 until somebody knocks them off, because they're just the reigning champs. And I feel similarly with Michigan in the Big Ten. It's like, well, they've beaten Penn State, they've beaten Ohio State with a formula that works. And Michigan has basically their whole team back from last year. And so while Penn State might look good, Ohio State might, the ESPN FPI rankings love Ohio State. And so a lot of people like to start playing that game. And until you see it on the field, I think you have to assume Michigan is going to repeat and get into the championship.
Oh, I'll tell you, maybe it's just September, and by November we have a different tune, but this seems like a very balanced year. geographically, like Washington might be the best team playing the best football right now. Texas, I hate to say it, they look really good.
Yeah.
But so I guess what's also your vibe as like, Big Ten guy? All of a sudden you're getting these, UCLA, USC, Washington, Oregon in next year. Like what are you like, can't wait, these games are exciting? Or does part of you think that, hey, we're losing a little bit of our identity? Why should we be playing Washington? Why should we be playing UCLA in a conference game?
That's a great question. I mean, and really that is the question in college football right now. I used to be a traditionalist, don't touch anything. I'm a Michigan guy. The big house doesn't change. Nothing changes. I'm singing a different tune nowadays. I mean, I'm choosing to be grateful and optimistic that there's buzz circulating around these changes in college football. If you look at the AP top 10 right now, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Washington, USC, not Utah, Washington, USC, Oregon. That's 6 out of the 10 top 10 that are going to be 2024 Big Ten teams. And so it'll be interesting. The Rose Bowl has always been a special place for Big Ten fans, and to have UCLA bring that stadium into the fold, it's just unavoidable at this point. There's no going back to the way that it was. And so I'm one of I think the minority that just, I don't think the game is being ruined at all. I actually think the changes are good. And I think that, yes, it'll be weird when Rutgers travels to Eugene, Oregon. Like that's a little bit of a strange trip, but it's interesting nonetheless. And so I think college football fans have a lot of good football to watch.
I'm interested after this game because I want you to circle back. I want you to, because I think Rutgers is that like this year's actually pretty good. Like they're decent.
Yeah.
Who would you say in the Big Ten? Like I was gonna ask, who do you think is better, just football wise, like Rutgers or Nebraska after this game? After you watch Nebraska, but like, how do you rank? Okay, we know there's the big three in Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. After that, like, is it Maryland and Rutgers in the Big Ten East?
It's so hard to call that right now. And you know what? I would not be surprised if it was Rutgers. We just don't know. A guy like Greg Schiano, he fields a gritty team. Rutgers appears to be pretty good. We just got to see more out of Maryland at this point. Maryland is not quite ranked, but they're in the couple of teams like receiving votes that are close to being ranked. I think in 2 or 3 weeks, we're really going to know, who's good over there. It's not Michigan State. It's not Indiana, right? It's not. Yeah. We know who it's not. We just. I'm going to say Rutgers right now, just based on the fact that they've beaten some other Power 5 teams, even if it was Virginia Tech and Northwestern. But Maryland could end up being that fourth team to take a look at. Maryland will play Ohio State. Not this weekend, but the next. And that's when we're going to see what they're made of. Can they put points on the board? For Maryland, they don't necessarily have to win that game to be taken seriously, but if they're competitive in that game, then everybody's going to realize Maryland is for real.
Yeah, I mean, Maryland comes to Lincoln in November. I'm hoping they're a little beat up, a little run down. Nebraska needs 4 wins to get to a bowl, which would be a successful season. And I think like real progress, like good progress from Matt Rule. So, I mean, between, as a Nebraska fan, you cannot count any game as a win, but like, if you're looking, okay, maybe Northwestern and Purdue, and then somewhere between Maryland, Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, I might be forgetting one, but I don't think I am. Like, you have to win 2 of those. So it's like, Maryland's going to be an interesting test, but I'm hoping it's like a cold day and Maryland's a little bruised up and they're traveling and Nebraska can eke out a win. But I have Maryland. It's impressive what they've done with that with that team.
Well, I hope that Matt Rule has all the success in the world, just not this weekend. So before we wrap up, Jeff, where can people find you? Where can, if my followers want some intel on Nebraska, how can they follow you?
Can always twitter.com/Huskers Gameday. I'm not affiliate. It's just a fan account. It kind of blew up, but like been doing it for almost 15 since like Bo was coach, Bo Pelini, like 15 years ago. And then you can find me there. You can drop me an email at huskersgameday@gmail.com. And I want to if I can give a plug, teamjackfoundation.com. If you remember, like 10 years ago, there was a little kid who ran during the spring game for a touchdown at Memorial Stadium. It was like on the Today Show, all of that. But it's a pediatric cancer foundation, and I retweet them and try to. I don't raise money, but like I expose, give them my platform. And if you're feeling generous, donate to them. You can't go wrong. And so I guess that would be the one plug I want to give.
I'll make sure to throw that out there on everything that I have as well. That's a great cause. Jeff, it's nice to meet you, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time. Enjoy the game on Saturday. For Jeff Williams, I'm Michael Smeltzer. That was Behind Enemy Lines.